Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the weekly current affairs program, Double Standards, which we present to you from 6 to 7 p.m. every Monday. This program is interactive and live, so we discuss the main issues of the day in the first half before the break, and when I come back after the break, the telephone lines are opened, inviting and encouraging the audience, the viewers, to make telephone calls and ask any question pertaining to today's topic or comment their point of view about the program, or if they want to add to or add on to this program, that is always appreciated. After 13th of November Paris carnage, today, which is 23rd of November, Monday, is a very important day. About 7-8 major events have taken place today by now to address the scourge of terrorism, the perpetrators and the defenders, and the silent majorities, or I call it, using the 19th century term of that time's diplomacy and current affairs in Europe, benevolent neutrality. So all these things have been discussed and examined in the context of the recent Paris bloodbath of 13th of November. I quickly enumerate those events that took place today. One was the British Prime Minister. He was in Paris. He met with the French President François Hollande, his French counterpart Manuel Valls, and the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, and along with other important figures dealing with France's national security architecture. So that was a very important time. He spent about 4.5 hours with the French leadership discussing the scenario, the post 13th of November scenario in Europe. The second event that is also of a paramount importance is that the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he was in Tehran today attending the summit meeting of 8 gas-producing countries. And it was organized by Iran, and Vladimir Putin spent a reasonable amount of time in Tehran today and met with the supreme leader, Ayatollah Al-Uzma Ali Khamenei, and the president of Iran, Dr. Hassan Rouhani, the Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif, former Foreign Minister who is the Chief Mandarin of National Security, Dr. Ali Akbar Velayati, and the heads of the armed forces. So it was a very, very powerful meeting, and so many decisions were taken, political, commercial, and military decisions. They were taken today there. That's the second important event. The third important event that happened here in this country, that after 5 years, as a requirement by the MOD, Ministry of Defence in the UK, the SDSR, Strategic Defence and Security Review, was unveiled today, and in that I'll come back in details about this later. And it was discussed that what are the new threats facing Britain and how well prepared Britain is to cope with those threats. The next event that happened was that more than a score, more than 20 terrorists were arrested in Brussels today, and on 4 or 5 major raids, and it was Molenbeek, the town Molenbeek was completely cordoned off, and house-to-house search was carried out very extensively today. The next important event that occurred today was that similar raids were carried out by the French paramilitary forces and the police forces in 7 major towns: France, Toulouse, Marseille, Lyon, Lille, and others. And the next important is that event number 6 of today, of 23rd of November, was that King Salman of Saudi Arabia, he convened an extraordinary secret meeting and invited the military chief, Saudi military chief, Saudi intelligence chief, the defense minister, his son, the heir apparent, son of Naif, and other important people and the foreign minister Adil bin Jubair. So he organized and he headed an extraordinary meeting, and some important decisions were taken today in Riyadh also. Event number 7 was that it was a bit cause of dismay, and I was a little disappointed to learn that the Chancellor of Exchequer, he reaffirmed massive cuts to fund the Metropolitan Police and other law enforcing agencies to provide them ways and means to counter this threat. So these 7 events were very, very important that took place today. It is said, historically we use this term, that it is said throughout the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century and 21st century that if Paris sneezes, the entire world catches cold. Today I was amused, and I was rather encouraged that sometimes these major powers, the members of NATO, the Western powers, the military powers like France, the 6th biggest economy in the world, and 6th most formidable military power in the world. So a discussion on the sidelines. Today, Pakistan's Zarb-e-Azb was discussed in Paris today. And a few questions were asked in some of the press conferences, press briefings. Some journalists, they asked that what lessons can the West learn from Pakistan's campaign, military campaign, to defeat the Taliban in Pakistan. And I would like to add that it's more than 11 months now the Zarb-e-Azb was launched successfully, and 2/3 of the problem, the power, the strength, the sanguinary prowess of Taliban in Pakistan, that has been subdued, that has been quelled in the last 11 years. So certain points that were discussed today in France, and I would like to share with you, it might be appearing in some of the newspapers tomorrow, and the French media or the Western European media will pick it up, some of those excerpts from today's media briefings. It was discussed today that how Pakistan's national security mandarins, they successfully launched Zarb-e-Azb. And if some lessons are to be learned from that success story, how the Western world in the post-13 November Paris attacks can address these issues and formulate a sustainable and effective strategy to deal with the ISIS and their affiliates who have launched this bloodbath in Europe. On the 13th of November, it was Paris, and it was a 4-grade threat in Brussels, still it is, and the people who are looking after the national security in Britain, they are also spending sleepless nights in London as well. So what was the hallmark of General Rahil Sharif's Zarb-e-Azb, the military strategy to eliminate the threat of Taliban in Pakistan, that has already claimed more than 50,000 civilian lives in Pakistan only in the last 5 years. So what it was discussed, and I would like to admire General Rahil and his subordinates, other military commanders who are supporting him from Pakistan's Air Force and Pakistan's Navy and Pakistan's intelligence agencies. And of course, I would like to give some credit to the civilian government also. Perhaps by circumstantial compulsion, they acquiesced to go for this unpopular decision and launch the military action in Pakistan. So there are eight major points that make Zarb-e-Azb successful today, and the other countries like France and Britain can learn some lessons. When this was launched, it was already planned 2 to 3 years before. And first of all, the armed forces in Pakistan, they decided in principle 2 areas they addressed. One was to cut off the arms supply lines to the Taliban. Number 2, to monitor and to impede the massive cash transfers bankrolled by some of the Muslim countries who have their stakes in Pakistan. So the funding streams were cut off. Number 2, weapon deliveries, they were cut off. Number 3, Pakistan's armed forces, they succeeded to block the logistical support to the Taliban marauders. Next was they blocked the media support to the Taliban, and all those media houses in Pakistan that had soft corner about them. They, in a way, they had their tacit loyalties towards Taliban. They were asked that enough is enough. You have to stop that support, media support to the Taliban. Next point is Pakistan's armed forces, they withstood the pressure from Riyadh, and they said, let us deal with the Pakistani threats with the Pakistani solution. So that was a very strong message. Point number 6 was that Pakistan's armed forces, the national security mandarins, they withstood the pressure from the so-called international humanitarian organizations, the NGOs, human rights, and all that nonsense. They have been hampering the military action against the terrorists in Pakistan. So the Pakistan Armed Forces said that they are not taking any nonsense from these NGOs, these so-called human rights activists operating in Pakistan and having their own hidden agendas to destabilize Pakistan and make the hay while the sun shines. The next point was the public opinion. A few major bomb blasts that culminated on the 16th of December when our Army Public School at Versek Road, Peshawar, that was attacked, that killed dozens, 144 innocent civilians, and including more than 135, 136 children at school. So that culminated, and that triggered the strong decision by the armed forces that now they are going to take the Taliban to task. The next point was that prosecution. I give full marks to Pakistan's courts that expedited the prosecution process, and some dangerous criminals on whose heads there was a massive bounties also. So they were prosecuted, sentenced, and they were executed also. And after those death sentences, about 2/3 of the problem of Taliban, Pakistani version of Taliban's, that has been addressed so far. But I don't have any wishful thinkings about that. 2/3 of the problem has been addressed so far. Now the problem is that as Pakistan's Prime Minister was saying today, that they would uproot the scourge of terrorism. And that is a good statement. But if that is supported by his actions, in action he has been covered, he has been completely ambivalent and confused in his strategy. It is the armed forces that is really are the people who are in the line of the fire. So they are really taking the Taliban to task. So these are the lessons which I'm sure the French military leadership, the French armed forces, and the French political elites, and the British political elites, British armed forces, they must learn from Pakistan. That if sometimes these powerful countries, in most of the cases, they behave arrogantly, but sometimes some good sense prevails, and they take into account if there is a successful model, they don't hesitate to adopt whatever the ingredients and whatever the points are relevant to their national security. So in a way, it was a good day, packed with events today, and duly supported by a monumental resolution passed by the UN Security Council on Friday. And on Saturday, it was adopted by 15-0. All the 15 members of UN Security Council, they adopted a resolution number 2214. And they also ratified more than 10 other resolutions that were previously passed against the terrorists, including the ISIL or ISIS. Now today I would like to share with you, I have been contemplating the whole day today to provide some sort of acronymous explanation of this term ISIL or ISIS. And when I discuss the perpetrators, the fund providers, the weapon providers to the ISIS and ISIL, so it gave me a very a sort of term, how to explain this term, and I resorted to call and would like to share with you that it wouldn't be wrong to say that ISIS may be construed as acronymously ISIS, Israelis and Saudis in Iraq and Syria. So that is very, very reflective term explanation. And that is the solution also today. I always say that if today the world powers, they know it, the National Security Agency, NSA, in the United States, that is looking after the cyber security of the world, and the GC headquarters in Britain, MI6, MI5, the CIA in the United States, DNI, the Directorate of National Intelligence, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the respective intelligence and cyber agencies in all the powerful, militarily and economically powerful countries of the world, they are definitely, they know this area, that who are the perpetrators, who have been providing funds and weapons to the ISIL and ISIS. And I always say that if 4 to 5 countries are persuaded to come on the table and take a solemn pledge from them, half of the problem of the threat of ISIS in not only Syria and Iraq and Yemen and Sinai Peninsula and northeast of Nigeria. Not only these areas, but on other countries potentially under the threat of the spread of ISIS. Britain is one of them. That would be addressed. 50% of that would be addressed. Let's diagnose the problem. If today, I would not spare any time, I would not waste any time, but I would say, if today the world powers led by the United States, they get hold of Tayyip Erdogan, Abdul Fattah Sisi of Egypt, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, King Salman of Saudi Arabia, if these four countries, if these four heads of the governments in these four countries, if they are brought and invited on the negotiating tables and they are asked, please play your vital role, play more responsible role, stop funding the ISIS, stop providing them weapons, stop providing them the situation on ground, stop providing them the computer command and control and other things, stop training them, stop radicalizing them, stop deploying them. If the Western powers, they are able to convince these four countries, half of the problem would be over. And then later on in the second half, they can come to the strategy without addressing these four countries and inviting these four countries. This is my strong faith and conviction that no anti-ISIS or anti-terrorism campaign or strategy would work effectively. I'll take a short break, and when I come back after the short break, the telephone lines would be opened. You're encouraged to make telephone calls. So let's have a short break.